had some time to dry, and I think what I want to do now is I want to think about putting on some putty, filling in the gaps, and we can think about actually moving on and painting it. So everything is nice and dry and it worked really well. The windows are in, and I think what we're going to do now is we're going to start to putty the seams, and we'll see how that looks. You guys may know the expression hindsight is 20/20. If I could go back, I think I would have taken these pieces, snipped off the end pieces, and brought them out just a little bit more. Because see how they almost seem to be recessed when we're looking at it from the top. Not much, but just enough where I would have liked to have been able to push this out a little bit more so it wouldn't be as recessed. But they're in now, they're all glued into place, and we can think about moving on. When it comes to this section, or the bottom part, we don't really need to putty seams over here. It's pretty well filled in. There are no gaps, so it made contact really well. So that section is all set. The back, we'll put a little bit to build out the back, and then we'll have to put just a little bit of the putty to close a seam around the impulse engines. But the biggest part for this section is going to be these gaps, these lines, or these seams. When it comes to the top of the saucer section, again, there is a little bit of a gap on the inside. And what we'll do is we'll start by putting in the putty around the inside on the bottom and around here. We'll do it from the bottom first. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill it in. Actually, I'm going to put some in there, and I think I'll use my finger. Yeah, I just want to make sure that the gaps are filled in. So you can see it looks pretty good. Maybe a little bit more over here. That. And I'll put a little bit on the outside. There, that looks good. Get that nice and smooth around the seam area. There. Because this is going to be very noticeable, so we want to make sure that it's absolutely closed up and smooth. So we got to wait for that to dry. Same thing on the bottom. Make sure that all these areas are closed up. One way I like to check is we'll take the light and we'll make sure that there is no leak. And the seams, you can see, are completely closed up. So we're going to wait for that to completely dry before we even attempt to touch that. So we're going to do for the same thing for the impulse engines or the impulse deck. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to close in the seams at the bottom first. All right, let's do the top now. Let's do the same thing. I want to check it. We'll use the light to make sure that there's no light leak. That looks good. So that's going to look pretty good. So that looks good. So we're going to have to wait for the whole thing to completely dry before we even attempt to clean off the putty. But it's going to be important that the seams are nice and smooth. So we're going to have to wait for that to dry. That's going to probably be, I'll probably wait overnight for that. Now when it comes to the bottom section, we're going to be doing, let's see, I'll start from the side of the port side. And we need to put just enough to kind of cover the seams. But I'm having an issue right now because I thought I had more of the putty than I actually do, so I might not have enough. I'm going to have to reorder some. I'm going to put this kind of like that. I'm going to go like that, and that way there, when we smooth it out, that'll get rid of the gaps. So I'm going to go around and we're going to do all the windows. Alright, let's go around and make sure that we have the gaps filled. See, my biggest thing I want to do is try to bring get that indentation of the windows and bring it forward where the seam actually looks like it's out towards the edge and it's not recessed. Because we can always go back and we can add more putty if we need to. So we need to let that dry now. So this is going to take a while. Okay, so this had overnight to dry. And what we're going to start to do is we're going to start to clean off the putty. If we need to put more, we'll put more. And if it ends up being good, we'll get ready to paint. You can see right off the bat, we need to put more over here on either side because I had missed that. All right, let's start with the, we'll put this aside for a minute. And we're going to start with the bottom. Everything's nice and dry. So what I'm going to start to do is we're going to start to smooth out the putty. And again, if we need to put more, we'll put more down. That's the beauty of this, the putty. I love this stuff. It's very crappy modeler friendly. It's like for me. And when you, matter of fact, I got to get some more. To be able to wipe it instead of sanding it off, I think is really, really advantageous. So what I'm trying to do is the windows themselves were ever so slightly depressed. When it comes to putting the parts in, again, I wish I had cut the tabs and brought them out a little bit to make them a little more even with the surface of the saucer section. But hopefully you guys can see what I'm doing. I put the putty in the areas to bring the sides out and kind of hide the seams. I want to make sure it's smooth. See, that looks like a pretty good seam. It's all covered up. And on the same token, we got to make sure that we don't take off too much. You can see, looking pretty good. And don't worry about where you're able to see the bottom, because that's just because the putty is thin. We will be putting the light block in. I'm going to be using the black paint for the inside as well as the reflective chrome. So that's going to look good. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. I'm going to do the same thing. So looks like we're getting those seams out, and we're smoothing them out. See how it's, when we come around, we need to get those nice and smooth, because the paint is going to be very unforgiving. All right, let's move on to the next one. Go over it and just gradually smooth it down. Think of it as opposite for painting. You know, for the best results, you do the small, thin layers, and then you just build those up. Well, with taking off the putty, it's kind of like the same thing, but opposite. So we're gonna gradually remove the putty. Make sure that that's even. All right, so we got one more, and then we'll go around and we'll make sure that all the putty is removed. You see there's a little bit on the bottom. All right. Again, I don't want to take too much off. All right, let's go around and make sure I got all of the putty. You gotta make sure that the tops are smooth as well, for the top half to fit on. Just looking pretty good. There. So I think the contact between the Sensidome area and the bottom of the hull is so good. You can see there's no light leak at all. So that's going to be good. We don't need to putty that. We don't have to worry about the seam, only because we're going to have the lighting coming through on the bottom with these, and then we're going to have the SMD illuminating from the sides. So when it comes to the bottom half, I'm thinking that this is going to be pretty good until we paint. After we paint, then we start the real fun. We're going to be doing we're going to smooth these sections out, and I'm going to keep them the way they are now as a guide. But we'll smooth them out and we'll drill, and we're going to put the LEDs through the bottoms. These would be the beacon lanterns, the red and the green. And let me show you guys the area. We're going to have to do a little bit of filling out in this, but we're going to wait until the halves are together. You can see we'll go around, and I want to show you guys the windows. See how the seams, the little gaps got filled, and it kind of made it smoother when it comes to those little window pieces going around to the outer rim of the hull. So, like I said, I think this one is ready to prime. We can actually put this aside now, and what we're going to do is I'm going to let this dry because it's still a little bit wet. And good thing, see, we got to get all the plastic off, all the putty. So we're going to let this dry. And once it's bone dry, then we won't have to worry about the paint coming in contact with the wet putty. So, and one of the advantages of not having to sand is we don't have the dust everywhere. But so this is all set. We're ready to prime. And first thing I'm going to do, let me show you guys. We're going to use the black, and I like the Rust-Oleum. And this is the 2X. This has got the paint and the primer. This is going to light block. Once the light blocking is done, I like to use the metallic finish, and this is what it's going to look like. And that's going to, make a great reflective surface for all the lights we're going to put on. We're going to put a lot of lights in here, so we're going to make sure it's really, really light blocked well. We don't want any light leaks. I did the Enterprise, the reissue of the original AMT Enterprise kit, and it was so thin. I had put 2 layers on either side, and it was still, the lights were bleeding through. So I gotta decide also, I might not go with the LED tape. I think I might do the bulbs for the windows, the LEDs, and wherever else we need to put it. I might be using the SMDs or the LED bulbs, but we'll see for now. But anyway, this is all set. We got to put this aside, and we need to start working on this section. Like I said, before we paint, we absolutely have to fill in the areas around the impulse deck. So let's go ahead. I think I'm going to start with the area around C deck. And we're going to start removing the putty from the extra putty from the actual piece. We don't really have to worry about the way this looks because this is going to be on the inside, but this is going to help block the light. But we just want to get all the windows clear. let's see. Looks like lastly we have the back, where the officers' lounge is. And obviously we got to make that clean because we gotta mask off the windows so we can look in and see the officers' lounge. This is a good way to see it, where they're coming clean. And that's what we need to mask off. So it's looking pretty good. I think that's all the way. So when it comes to the bottom, I think that looks good. And again, I want to keep... See how it still looks good? You can't see any of the seams. Alright, let's smooth it all out now. We'll do the outside. And we had started from the starboard side. So some of the areas, you might say, well, there's still putty there, but it's actually areas that are slightly depressed. And you can see how it's smoothing out. And what it's going to do is, as we wipe away or take down the layers of the putty, it's only going to leave behind the dips or the depressed areas. You can see it's looking good, but I'm gonna have to put another coat of the putty, and gradually we'll keep putting on the coats and we'll keep filling in the gaps, because I want to make sure that this section of the ship is absolutely seamless, because this is one that's going to be seen first. You figure when you look at the Enterprise, what do you look at? If you're looking at the bottom, you look at the sensor dome area. If you look at the top, you look at the bridge, B and C decks. So I want to make sure we have this really nice and clean and seamless. And I want to get all of the putty off the plastic. And unless it's in an area filling a gap, that's different, but we don't want it to interfere with the lines on the hull at all. I just want to make sure that they're totally obstruction free in the windows, because that's going to be another part of the ship that's going to be very noticeable, is where we're going to see the look in and see the officers' lounge. All right, let's check this out. See the windows? And don't worry, it's going to be nice and clean before we actually do the painting. But we got 1, 2, 3. We got 4 of the windows that are in the back. And we're going to be able to look in, and we're going to be able to see the officers' lounge, which is a pretty cool touch. So that looks, I think that looks pretty good. Those seams that we had when I showed you before we put the putty on, you remember back in the back section, there were those really wicked gaps, and those are pretty much filled in. And we're going to put another layer of the putty, and we're going to go around and we're going to smooth it out, and then we're going to remove the excess putty again. And we're going to do that as many times as we need to until it's totally smooth and seamless. All right, let's start working on the impulse crystals. So there's not really much that we need to do with the underneath. We don't really have to clean that up. because of the areas around the crystal. Because the crystal itself, remember guys, that's going to be blue, and that's a separate piece. So when we mask, the only thing we're going to really have to mask off are the engines, the flat pieces in the back. That's it. We're not painting the bottom. We're going to mask, paint block the top, and then put the finish coat over the top. So let's start getting all the putty off of the impulse decks. And you can see we're very much in need of more layers on this section. So I'm going to get this cleaned out. And basically for the first layer, what I like to do is I like to just make sure that the gaps are starting to be filled in. And then we can build off of that. We have actually like a base. Now the instructions for the impulse decks, guys, they had a piece. They wanted you to fabricate a piece that went across. I didn't do that because I felt that it would interfere with the crystal, because I'm going to be lighting it from underneath. That's why I didn't do that. But because I didn't do that, I have to make sure that it's very secure in here. It was glued very well. That's why I put it into position with both halves together before I actually glued it. So again, I want to make sure that the excess putty is off and that just the seam is filled. And what we'll be able to do is we're going to be able to put another layer over that, and it'll build out the bottom, or it'll give us like a base. See, that was a really wicked gap before we put the putty on. Now it's starting to be filled in. So it's pretty good. And again, see the gaps on either side. We got to fill that in. All right, we're going to go around. So you notice how I'm trying to use my finger to push the putty into the seam. And as we go along, I kind of run my finger down to use up the putty. See? So this one is going to look, it's going to get even nicer when we clean it down. So that looks good. Now we're going to do the same thing. We got to let that really, really, really dry, where it's bone dry and it's really nice and hard. Let's see if we can actually do this section. We want to get the putty in all the way to the end, the impulse crystals, where it meets the outer hull. So that looks good. Okay, so this had overnight to dry. And in a perfect case scenario, I'll be able to remove everything and the seams will be perfect and nice and smooth, and we won't need to add another layer of putty. That would be perfect case scenario. And again, that's what I love about this stuff. We don't have to worry about sanding and damaging anything on the hull, the grid lines. So let's see how smooth we can get it. Again, that's just about the way I want it. That's actually I'm liking it. You can see it's nice and smooth. The gap is gone. It's nice and seamless where C deck meets the top of the primary hull. At least where the windows are, because like I said, we're gonna mask off the windows. Nice. Hopefully you guys can see the windows that'll be going around. All the way back to the officer's lounge. So that's just about done. So that's ready to paint. Well, actually it's ready to mask off. So let's do the impulse deck area. So the first thing I want to do is we're going to get the extra off of the actual piece. Yeah, get it off this way. Remember it was the same thing for this section. There was a wicked gap over there, and that's looking really good. Maybe we need to get rid of this. See how it's starting to shape? I'm liking how the putty's filling in the gap. That's a nice shot. Hopefully you guys can see now that gap that was there. That's filled in pretty nicely. We're gonna make sure, like I said, we did on the other side, we're gonna make sure that we're able to actually close the halves together without having a putty in the way. A little bit more on that side. So let's get all that off. We're going to do the inside first, or the underneath. We're going to light block everything because we did the putty, we closed the areas in, and we sanded and smoothed everything out. So I think we're ready to go ahead and we're going to light block. And again, we're going to use the Rust-Oleum, the black. We're going to light block the bottoms of both halves, and then we're going to use the reflective chrome. Okay. So what I'm going to do is we're going to paint, and I masked off the dome section and the impulse engines because we're going to be doing that from the top side. So let me go ahead, put a little bit. It's a little breezy out here today. Okay, so it's just starting to dry. And I have an idea. I'm just gonna frost it really quick with the coat of the metallic. That way there. What I'm thinking is both layers can cure together. So let's just put a little bit on. Just enough to be able to reflect everything. Like I said, it doesn't need to be a ton. The most important thing was light blocking it. And what this is going to do is it's going to, all the lights on the inside are going to reflect everything. So it had some time to dry and came out pretty good. The only problem is there's some overspray that went up on the surface. So what I'm going to do is we're going to clean that off, and I'm going to take off the masking tape for the bottom. Is what we'll do is we'll remask the top when we do it. And we're going to do the same thing with the top. We're going to mask this off, and we're going to put the masking or the light block on the top. Interestingly, you guys may or may not know that the smoothie doesn't have the phaser erase on. With getting the puttying and getting everything ready for the finished paint job. So in the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to clean all the overspray off the ship, and I'm going to mask the windows, and we're going to mask the impulse decks, and then we're going to light block it, and we're going to use the Tamiya to light block it. But it's too tacky to handle. So in the next video, we're going to pick up, and after we do that, then we'll be able to put the finished coat on, and again, I'll be using the Tamiya Pearl White. So my friends, thank you for watching, and until my next video on this project, I'll talk to you guys soon.